Good. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin always in the name of Allah, most merciful, most compassionate. Today we're going to be talking about an extremely important subject, which is the subject of ayat, of signs. The reason I got triggered, if you want, about this subject was we were doing our Quran class last week, Surat al-Imran, you can look it up, ayats 90 to 120, and during all those 30 ayats, 8 times the term came up, 8 times, ayat. Now when I went to my tafsir book, Marifal Quran, which is a very voluminous tafsir, there were 60 pages on this ayat, not one mention of the term ayat in there, aside from giving you the numbers of the ayat. You see, ayat is a word in Arabic that has several meanings, like a lot of things in Arabic. One of them is the verses of the Quran, but it's much more than that. Ayat are signs. If you go to the Arabic dictionary, it will say things like wonder, miracle, as a meaning for ayat. So this is something ajib, if you want. This is something magnificent, the ayat. And there are ayat, signs of Allah. He told us there are signs on the horizon and in ourselves. Outer signs and inner signs. This is straight from the Quran. So it's incumbent upon us to look at that. Now, for some reason, the Muslims, they have selective attention. The Americans call it cherry picking sometimes of the Quran. We're supposed to pay attention to all of the Quran. So this is an important subject, and I haven't heard it once. Some of the listeners may be able to correct me. I haven't heard a single khutbah talking about this very important idea. Have you, Adi?
I don't remember.
No. I haven't heard a single one anywhere talking about this, and yes, it's so crucial. You could be sure that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was watching the ayats all the time. For those who have maybe studied a bit too much fiqh and see a contradiction here, these are not omens, tatayur in Arabic. These are ayat, signs, and they're from Allah. And it's in our interest to read them as accurately as possible because they can tell us a lot of things. And I found them useful, especially, we'll talk about this shortly, on the spiritual path. Now, I did write an article this week about the ayats, talking about them relative to the politics of the Middle East. But today, on this channel, I like to emphasize the spiritual dimensions, not the political, worldly dimensions. So, ayat, very important. Muslims not paying enough attention. Westerners also dissing ayat. They don't like the idea of signs either, for other reasons, for materialist, empiricist reasons. So they have a lot of disparaging terms for ayat, for signs. They call them coincidences, or they call them superstitions, chance occurrences. When we studied, and I'm sure for those who have studied in the English schools, English literature, one of the terms used, if a novelist wrote a plot where the weather outside, for example, was corresponding to what was going on in the plot. You know, there's a lot of conflict, it's a stormy, thunderstorm, lightning day. Then the literary critics call this sympathetic fallacy. There's no relationship between the thunderstorms and what's going on in the world. But if you watch carefully, it's absolutely wrong. But we were taught this is a fallacy, this connection. And I've seen the signs of weather as ayat many times, especially in my spiritual process. I've seen it over and over and over again. We'll get to my process later, but while we're on the subject, I'll give you one example. Very interesting example. So, when I started on my spiritual path, we were taught mostly about the spiritual teachers in India. And I decided, after a couple of years of hearing about these rishis and Buddhists and some of the Sufis in India, that I was going to do a tour of India. And I was hoping to stay in the Himalayas and meditate, as Pirpal Ayat Khan encouraged us to do, to meditate in the caves of the Himalayas with the rishis. And so I organized this trip, a sabbatical, 1 year, no work, just meditation. And so I started on my journey, and the day I was leaving, the day before I was leaving, a call from the organizer. It was organized by some people in New York, actually, the abode of the message. And the organizer called me, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Dr. Krebs, but the trip has been canceled." I said, "What? You can't do this to me." We're also egocentric. You can't do this to me, as if I had some importance. So she said, no, I'm sorry, but there's been terrible flooding in India. And the people who were organizing this trip had to be rescued by Indian Army helicopters. It's that bad, the flooding. So I said, "What am I going to do?" She said, "Well, it'll probably be okay for next year." Next year? I had a whole year planned around this. Okay. So after my initial shock, I got readjusted and I went to London. And in London, this was before the internet. We didn't know what was going on in India. So I would go every morning to the Indian embassy because they had telegrams coming in from India. That was the easiest way to get information at that point. We didn't have satellite dishes and reports on BBC or Al Jazeera or something about what's going on. We had nothing of that. So I went to the embassy every day, flooding and more flooding and more flooding. The airports were closed in Bombay and New Delhi. Okay. So I went to Sweden to visit some friends from a previous sabbatical. And while I was in Sweden, there was a television program, and the television program was about Jerusalem. The lights went on. Jerusalem. Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Okay. Now this is before I understood anything about signs, but I already understood something about signs. Now, I'm saying this because I know a lot of people, I won't mention any particular names here, but some people who are very close to me, who I'm sure if they had decided to go to India, they would push ahead. They would wait. They would go closer to India, maybe Turkey or wherever, Bosnia, and wait until they could get to India. I have a plan, and my plan has to be realized. Know any people like that? That's the way we're taught to be, actually. Set all the coaches in the world. Set your objectives, and then we'll figure out a way to get to those objectives. Wrong. Wrong from a spiritual point of view. Maybe good from a business point of view or academic point of view. Wrong from a spiritual point of view. So I said, Jerusalem. Okay. So I rebooked all my tickets. It wasn't easy in those days. And I rebooked them all to Jerusalem, and I came. And the lady at the travel agency said, "Oh, we have a refund for you," because I said, "Cancel my ticket to Bombay. I'm not going to make it there." And she said, "Okay, we have a refund for you from Air France or British Airways, 50 cents for the rest of the trip." But that was the way they organized prices. Anyway, that wasn't an issue. And so I ended up in Jerusalem. And I did some studies in Judaism, and then I checked out the Christians, and in the end, that was my ticket to Islam. I met my first Muslim sheikh, Sheikh Mohammed Jamal, in Jerusalem. Why? Because I followed the signs. And because I followed the signs, I was following my destiny. I have no doubt about that in retrospect. Okay, so that's the important thing. Now, how the question that's connected to this question is, how do we not follow the signs? Or to use analytic terms, what are the personal defense mechanisms that make it so that we don't follow the signs? And there are a number. And most people do it that way. No matter what the signs are saying, what are they doing? They're following one of the following dimensions. Either their desire, I want this, so I'm going to pursue it. I think the stereotypic example in my mind, and this is not because the feminists might not like this, but it's a female example of a woman, my youngest daughter says, when they have a crush on someone, forget it, who really is turned on by this guy, and everything in her own experience and what people are telling her is stay away. She sees how irritable he is, how he gets upset about everything, how he only thinks about himself. But she wants him. And so she plows ahead. Okay? Well, every psychologist has seen this story. And when you say to them, maybe this isn't good for you, he's abusive, but I love him. That's desire. Okay? All the signs are there. You saw how he gets angry with you, and then if you continue, and many of them do, and then you end up in abuse, the worst case scenario is famicide, as we had a lot of during the COVID. Okay, but all of that is a result of not following the signs. You saw it the first time. You met at a restaurant and you went to the wrong restaurant and he got all upset with you because he had to wait for you at the right restaurant. It's there. All the road to heaven, the Christians say, is heaven already, which means all the road to hell is hell already also. Follow the signs. The other thing that prevents people from following the signs is their plans. Another story, archetypal story. I was traveling in Europe the first time with my friend Alan from medical school, and I think we were in the south of Italy at that time, or the south of France. I think it was Italy. And so we meet a couple of young ladies, and they look like really in a state of shock. Like some of the people in the Democratic Party after Biden's debate performance. They look, worse. So what happened? And they said, we got into this car with these guys and we knew they weren't right. And they tried to assault us and we had to jump out in the middle of the highway. I said, but you knew they weren't right. Why did you get in? We had an itinerary and we had to get to wherever, Rome, Naples, by this time. So we got in anyway. Okay. So the signs were all negative, but their plan, their itinerary, said they had to go forward. Problem. You'll see many people like that. Another variant on that I saw a few times in my practice was, let's take it from the female side again, a relationship started. Did I see men doing this? Anyway, mostly women. A relationship had started. It was good. This lady had been looking for a decent relationship for years, and now she found someone. But oops, I have my summer plans. The trip is already planned without him. And he can't fit in, he has work and this and that, can't afford it. So I said, cancel your plans. Something more relevant is happening. No, I planned this for a long time. I really want to see that Greek island that I've always dreamed about, as if that's paradise. 3 times out of 4, the relationship didn't last the time that she was away. It broke off before it could get stabilized. Again, the plan takes precedent over the signs, and the signs are the reality. That's what a lot of people don't understand also. The signs are the reality that Allah, God, has created in your life. Learn to see them, learn to read them, and learn to act on them. That is the path to freedom. That is the path to happiness. That is the path to being consistent, submissive to the will of God. Any other path is a path of misery. Then there are people with ideology. That's another way. You don't follow the signs. You follow your ideology. One of the most popular ideologies, I don't want to go too much into politics, but one of the most popular ideologies these days is woke ideology, which is the ideology of victimization. So if the signs are all negative for what you're doing, like let's say the Palestinian cause, everything just gets worse and worse. The signs are negative. You say, oh, I'm a victim of these people, America, Israel, whoever, Zionists. You're a victim. In the Quran, it teaches you that we're all accountable. There are some things about victimization and oppression, dhulum, but much more important is accountability. If something bad is happening, often this is a sign. Allah is telling you something. Learn to read those signs and you'll avoid incredible amounts of misery by doing this. Now, there are a number of places in my own life, I'm just looking, oh yeah. So while I'm thinking about this, this is another sign. Jung called this, Jung was aware of signs, by the way. Jung called this synchronicity. Now, it's more than synchronicity. Jung was looking at it from an unconscious psychological, but it's more than synchronicity. It's the will of God, because it's all interconnected, everything that's happening. So while I was preparing this talk and thinking about this subject, I'm listening to CBC radio, and there's a story that I never knew. It was right in my area of the world. The Quebec City Bridge collapsed in 1907. Had you ever heard of that? Hadi, who went through the French system, I went through the English system. Neither of us ever heard of this. 75 indigenous people were killed, 35 from Caughnawaga, right near Kanawaki, right near Montreal, were killed. And when the journalist is recounting the story, so these were indigenous people who were very skilled at high steel work, at great heights. They had no fear. But a few of them had noticed some things, some troublesome things. One of them had noticed that when they put in rivets into the structure, the rivets would just disappear, would break. The other thing, a few of them had noticed that there was a bend in the iron or steel, iron I guess, at the time. There was a bend, and they reported back to the engineers. Now, who are the engineers? The engineers are the rationalists. Rationalists get this consistently wrong. They never see ayats, because it doesn't make sense in their world. It's kind of an unconscious communication with the divine. So the engineers say, oh, it's nothing, it happens all the time. Rivets break, the iron bends a bit, no big deal. And then the whole thing crashed, 75 people killed, because they're not paying attention to signs. So, to the listeners, in each of your life, I was going to start with this actually, over the door to the Zawiya of Sheikh Abdullah Dagestani is a sign written in Arabic that says, learn to read the signs. He knew about this. Learn to read the signs. But outside of the world of Sufis, very few people have developed that skill, which is an essential life skill, to read those signs. So let me tell you a couple of others. that happened in my own life and how that brought me to where I am, which, without being arrogant, I think I'm at a good place actually for my age, and I think I've used my time in this life well, but I had to follow signs. Okay. One of the first signs happened in a relationship I had with a young woman who was upset with me for good reason, because I wouldn't go see her therapist at the time. At the time, I thought, irony of irony, psychiatry, psychotherapy is all poppycock, nothing to be concerned about, really. And so I refused to go see her therapist. And then she went and consulted with a friend. Consultation is good, by the way, for these things. And she came back and she said, "You're a positivist." I didn't even know what I'd studied a bit of philosophy, but I didn't even know what positivism is. For those who don't know, it's a form of empiricism related to scientific thinking. But it shook me, inner sign, which instead of, like a lot of people would say, "Oh, you're just upset with me because I didn't go." This is the excuses. Okay, this also goes with rejecting the signs they have. "Oh, you're just upset with me because I wouldn't go to your therapist. That's meaningless." No. There was a message. I felt it. It changed my life because I attended to that sign. And I tried to figure out what is positivism, what is the corrective. And in the end, the first thing I decided to do was get out of the field of science for a year. I went to Sweden and I learned about arts and literature and music and opera and all of that. Because I figured that was the only way to get out of the positivism. There was another incident. All this will be covered in my eventual writing, inshallah, of my autobiography. These signs. I'm in California and in a bookstore in Haight-Ashbury, the Esalen bookstore. Remember those days? Hippies, yippies, all of that, New Left. And there's a young lady that says, "What are you doing here, California?" And I say, "I came to study Gestalt therapy and bioenergetic therapy." She said, "Gestalt, man," with a look of total contempt and disgust. "Gestalt, man, that's not where it's at." So I had the normal reaction. This lady is, in French they'd say, "Sut." This lady is an idiot. Just ignore what she's saying. And I was walking out of the store and something caught me and I said, "Okay, so if Gestalt's not where it's at, where's it at?" And she looked me straight in the eyes and she said, "Spirituality, man, that's where it's at." And it went right to the core of my being. Now, if I were a rationalist, like most of the people I know, like we're trained to be from our schooling system, I would have said, "This lady is an idiot. What does she know? She was younger. I was young. She was younger than me. She doesn't express herself very well. She's a stupid lady. Why should I pay any attention?" Because God was speaking to you. This was an ayat. And it changed my life. If I ever met her, I would go back and thank her. Just like the other one who called me a positivist, and thank her. She shifted things, but this was from Allah. The third shift in personal ayat was when I finally did arrive in Jerusalem, and I finally found the Sheikh's home, and his son was there. And his son was an adolescent Palestinian with a grudge and a chip on his shoulder. And he said, "Oh, you came to learn about Islam?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I will tell you who the best Muslims in this world are." I said, "Oh, great. Okay, tell me all about it." He said, "You know about Idi Amin Dada, also known as the butcher of Kampala? You know about Muammar Gaddafi?" Well, most people know about Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He said, "They're the best Muslims." And on top of that, Moshe Dayan, who was the head of the Israeli Defense Forces, he should have been tougher on the Arabs. So he was an equal opportunity fool. Anyway, so when I heard this, my heart started beating, but you have to know what to pay attention to and what not to. There's an ayat happening here. My heart started beating. I said, this place is crazy. I better get out of there. These people are crazy. But something inside me, an inner voice, subtle inner voice, said, stick around. Wait till you meet the father. A couple hours later, the father arrived from work. He was a Qadi in Bethlehem, and he said, don't pay any attention to my son. He's just an adolescent in rebellion. I said, I thought you didn't have that in the Arab world. He said, oh yeah, we have plenty of that. His son ended up being a criminal in the United States, and then finally he repented, and I think he's a good Muslim, but he had a lot to go through. Another ayat. Okay, now reason would say, these people are crazy, I'm getting out of there. Then another thing happened, another ayat in that same place. It was a very fertile time. One of the ladies staying at that zawiya had jaundice. And it was my worst fear going east. I'd get jaundice. And I looked at her and I said, Zahra, you have jaundice. She said, oh, that's what it is. Okay, don't worry about it, Ibrahim. If Allah wants you to get jaundice, you'll get jaundice. And I was scared. It was my worst fear. I ran up the road. This was in Mount of Olives. I got the biggest bottle of Dettol I'd ever seen, and I washed out I sterilized the zawiya. I put her in quarantine. Nothing, no contact, and I never got jaundice. But jaundice was written for me because I got it in Egypt 10 years later, or 15 years later. Anyway, so, ayat. See, sometimes it's tricky. You would think this is a negative sign. Someone has jaundice. This is your fear. No, this is where you have to get skillful. Allah is Khair al-Makirin. He's the best of the strategists. So this is a strategy from Allah to test you. Because most people have seen their worst fear, they just run in the other direction. But a little voice inside me, you could call it as you want, intuition, let's call it. Tajali, a little voice inside of me, ilham in Arabic, said, no, stay. And I had some amazing experiences in Jerusalem because I was following the ayat. So let me see if we have something here that we need to trip to India. Oh yeah, okay. One more ayat. This is an internal ayat. I'm in Jordan. I'm studying with a Sufi sheikh there, and I start discussing with a friend of mine, who's still a friend. His name is Zaid, and he's telling me about, and I'm feeling a bit. There's nothing terrible going on, but I'm unsatisfied. I'm not satisfied with what's happening. I just did the retreat there, and I didn't like the results. And he starts talking to me about this sheikh, Abu Qasim Bil Khairi in Tunisia, and immediately I felt something really strong. An ayat. These are the ayat in the horizon and within yourself, within myself. Okay, very strong feeling. I looked at him and I said, we have to go there, you know. Just immediately. It was like love at first sight. We have to go there. He said, yeah, I know. So I said, why are you looking reluctant? And he said, well, I haven't been doing enough zikr, I'm ashamed. And the sheikh reproached him for not doing enough zikr. But in the end, he took it well. He was in. There was a lot of other things going on in his life. So there was another sign. So we're talking mostly about the spiritual path, but also in your worldly life. You know, we're taught, for example, don't listen to rumors. Well, you want to know a very well-kept secret? Most rumors are true. 95%, unless it's in politics where they're spreading mischief, but 95% of the time the rumors are absolutely true. So listen. If someone tells you, my brothers, I think, had this problem, someone told them, this businessman is crooked, but he talked very well. And they ended up getting ripped off by them. So listen to the rumors, because the rumors can also be ayat. as can your dreams. There's a whole article on the istikhara practice, on dreams. In dreams you can have ayat. We know that our holy prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had dreams before he had the revelation. So the dreams can also be ayat, guiding you in one direction or another. Be careful. And listen. Don't listen to your desire. Listen to the ayat of the dream. Don't listen to your desire or your plan. Look at the ayat around you. There are, I guarantee, every one of you, Allah is Kareem. Allah is Wahhab. He's generous. He's giving you signs all the time, almost every moment of the day, but definitely every day, of what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. And the signs can be outward or inward. So learn how to read them, and your life will go much better. You won't. Life is full of difficulties. You won't be able to avoid all the difficulties, but you'll avoid a lot of, what do they call it now in America? Unforced errors. Unforced errors. Okay, you want to avoid this because those can be very miserable. You know, and it can be about very down-to-earth things. There was a guy next door here, and he knew there was some squeak going on in the front of his car. I'm not that great at mechanics, but it might have been one of those ball joints or U-joints or something like that. And he ignored it. One day he came back, he looked in a state of shock. He said, "What happened?" He said, "The wheel just broke off completely in the tunnel." He was lucky to be alive. The car was totaled. Okay, so there are ayats in your car also. If you start hearing the brakes are squeaky, get them looked at. I remember, I'm laughing because I'm remembering one, probably my favorite TV program of all time was The Big Bang Theory. For those, it's very, very funny. And one time Sheldon, who's an obsessive Asperger's, maybe autistic, is with, what was her name, the lady?
Penny?
Penny, thank you. Sometimes the names don't come quickly enough. He was with Penny, and they were riding in her car, and the red light went on, and he said, they said, don't worry about it. It goes on from time. He said, what do you mean?
The engine light.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was the engine light or the brake light or the alternator. They have so many lights now. But one of the lights was on. Sometimes it's only that your door is not closed. So there are all kinds of lights. Anyway, one of the lights was on, and she said, it's no big deal. You know, we're from Nebraska. We don't worry about these things. No. If the light goes on in your car, pay attention. Okay, so practice. Try this stuff out in your daily life. I guarantee you there are signs all around you for everything, even if it appears minor or major. If you're looking for a mechanic or an electrician or something, there will be signs. Learn to follow them, and certainly spiritually there'll be lots of signs. Learn to follow them and not follow your thinking and your plans and your desires, and life will be considerably easier and less painful. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, salamun ala. And the sign, it's 33 minutes. This talk. That's a very important Sufi number. Good sign. Have a good week. See you soon. Inshallah.